Welcome back to Hardware Unboxed. A couple of days ago we presented our awards for the best PC games of 2019. Now we're back for the worst games of the year. As with our previous video, we are giving out technical awards only, so nothing on gameplay, story, or anything like that. Here at Hardware Unboxed, we're mostly interested in benchmarking games and providing advice for how to get games running really well on PC, so for us, giving out technical awards makes the most sense. Plus, we're not game reviewers, we wouldn't really know where to start on that one, so yeah, once again, before you go commenting about how we missed your least favorite game of the year, these are technical awards. And boy, is there quite a collection of games that qualify for these awards, because there have been some real shockers this year and some really disappointing releases. Like with our best of awards, we did ask our Patreon members to provide us with some nominations in the 5 categories we're looking at today, so I think we've got a great cross-section of titles given we didn't play absolutely everything that came out this year. So anyway, let's get on to it. We don't have a category this year for worst graphics because I don't think any game truly deserves that award, at least they wouldn't be as deserving as Fallout 76 was last year. Boy, that game looked awful for a AAA title and it ran like crap too. Anyway, this year our first category comes in the form of worst optimization. There are 2 standout titles here. One is Red Dead Redemption 2, a game that was so poorly optimized at launch we needed 2 separate videos to cover everything in the game and how to tweak the graphics settings to make it look nice and run nice. But as far as these awards are concerned, we're only giving Red Dead a dishonorable mention, but boy, is this a dishonorable mention. Red Dead isn't a bad game per se, in that if you do manage to tweak the graphics appropriately, it can still look stunning while delivering acceptable performance. It's not like an Assassin's Creed Odyssey where there can still be performance or visual problems even with optimized settings. Red Dead 2 is a great looking game and it's still worthy of our best graphics award. No, the problems with Red Dead is that Rockstar made it difficult for gamers to get the game running nicely. There are no presets, for example, just a few rubbish quality sliders, and they vary depending on what hardware it auto detects in your system. They aren't very effective, and I don't think many people trusted them in the first place. Having proper presets would have simplified this situation. But the bigger error, in my opinion, was mislabeling a number of the quality options. There are some high and ultra settings here that really tank performance to a crazy level, and other high and ultra settings that barely shift the needle in terms of frame rate. Given PC gamers love flicking everything up to ultra or even high, having some crazy settings labeled as high makes it hard for people to get a level of performance they are expecting. In this game, medium is more like high and high is more like extreme. Plus there are just so many options to change, it is a real mess. But the real winner of our worst optimization award for 2019 is Borderlands 3. This game launched in a disgraceful state with performance well below the level most people expected given its visuals. I don't think the visuals are as bad as many people say, but Borderlands 3 isn't one of the top tier titles in terms of graphics, yet it performs often worse than some of the year's most intensive games. The issues with Borderlands 3 mostly amount to a small handful of graphic settings that absolutely tank performance for very little visual gain. One of those is volumetric lighting, which is a common pain point in PC ports, where developers feel the need to crank up this setting when the medium or low modes are just fine and really could just be renamed to Ultra. Using our optimization guide, for example, can deliver around a 50% improvement to performance for nearly no change to visuals, which is a massive improvement and indicative of the poor state of Borderlands 3's out-of-the-box Ultra preset. The game also seems to be a fairly janky implementation of Epic's Unreal Engine 4 with a weak DirectX 12 mode and heavy single threading, which isn't great for those that have powerful multi-core CPUs. Plus, it's hard to get past how the game is only a modest improvement over Borderlands 2 visually, yet it runs significantly worse. To me, this game should run at least as well as something like Gears 5 or Resident Evil 2, if not better given the choice for stylized visuals over pure realism, which should be easier to render. A few tweaks to the presets would have cut out the complaints over how the game performs terribly, but even then the experience wouldn't be amazing, which is why it's a worthy winner of this year's Worst Optimization Award. Every year there are a handful of developers that completely stuff up the launch of their major game they've been slaving over for years. Whether that's through a lack of quality assurance to check how the game runs across hardware configurations, or completely broken online functionality that doesn't let people play the game they have paid for, PC gamers often get the raw end of the stick when it comes to stability and ease of access on day one. 2019 has seen no shortage of poor launch day experiences. Borderlands 3's terrible optimization is one, but there are plenty more. Ghost Recon Breakpoint comes to mind as a game that had a poor launch with significant technical issues, while on the other hand we have a game like Gears 5 that due to Xbox Live issues refused to let people play on launch day. I'll even happily throw Jedi Fallen Order into this category because even though the game is quite good, both the PC and console versions have stuttering issues when the game tries to load new sections, which should have been addressed before the launch. Oh, and who could forget the Fallout 76 Premium subscription which launched just a few months ago but was plagued with bugs and technical issues. A Bethesda game plagued with bugs? Who would have guessed? But by far the worst launch of 2019, and really it isn't a competition here, is Red Dead Redemption 2. This game's launch was an absolute disaster, and there are just so many angles to which it was a disaster. First, let's talk crashes, because this game crashed a lot at launch. Want to just open the game? Yeah, it might crash. What about riding your horse? Seems like a good time to crash. Heading into a township? Yep, the game would pretty much likely gonna crash. And these were widespread issues across many hardware configurations. Then there was the battle between whether the DirectX 12 or Vulkan implementations were worse. For many people, Vulkan introduced significant stuttering during gameplay, while DirectX 12 was more prone to crashing at key moments. So yeah, fantastic choice there between two terrible situations. It seems some of these issues have been cleared up now, but to have both APIs essentially broken in one way or another at launch is completely unacceptable. And on top of that, we get all the optimization problems I was describing earlier, which led to poor performance in most configurations. It's undoubtedly a beautiful game with fantastic gameplay and story, but let's be honest, you can't launch a game in this state and expect people to be happy. It was a disgrace and truly deserving of our worst launch of 2019 award. In place of our Worst Graphics Award, we've introduced a new category for Worst PC Port. As PC gamers, there are just some features we expect to be included in our games. This is stuff like unlimited frame rates rather than 30 or 60 FPS caps, the ability to run the game at a wide range of resolutions, including in ultra-wide configurations, an option to toggle VSync on or off depending on our needs or preferences, remappable controls, a decent selection of graphics options, and so on. Every year there are games that just completely miss the memo on this one and bring across the worst console port to PC, with many of these features missing or broken. A number of our Patreon members nominated Red Dead Redemption 2 in this category, and I get where they're coming from, but there are a couple of ports this year that were far worse in their approach to bringing a game across to PC. Our dishonorable mention in this category is Detroit Become Human, a game from Quantic Dream that launched on PlayStation 4 last year, but only made its way across to PC this month via the Epic Game Store. Given they had more than a year to work on this PC port, launching with a frame rate cap of either 30 or 60 FPS and no ultra-wide support is pretty bad, along with no FOV options and limited audio options. On top of that, I've heard consistent reports of crashing, although at least performance seems somewhat okay. It should never be acceptable to have to dive into the ini files or create custom patching tools to get ultra-wide support or to remove frame rate caps, so this has been a bit of a fail from a game that some were eagerly awaiting on PC. But the winner of our Worst Port of 2019 award goes to Sekiro: Shadows Die Twice. From Software games are beloved by many, but it just seems like they have absolutely no idea how to create a PC game, and often just completely botch the release. And Sekiro is no exception here. It's another one of their fails in bringing a game to PC. It honestly seems like they really don't care about the PC versions. So what are the problems with Sekiro? Well, where do we begin? Firstly, the game is capped to 60 FPS, and if you want to uncap the game, you'll need to run a patching tool every time the game is launched. But it's worse than that because the game defaults to a full screen mode and runs your monitor at 60 Hz, so that needs to be patched too if you have a high refresh rate display. Oh, and there's no borderless full screen mode, which also needed to be added through a third-party community patch. The list goes on. There's no proper support for ultra-wide monitors. There's no field of view setting. There isn't even support for configuring VSync. It's on by default, and if you want it disabled, you'll need to force it off in your GPU's control panel. Then there are the usual stability concerns, including one issue where gamers with a second monitor see horrible frame rate drops. That's a pretty crazy list that just about fails every major category for a solid PC port. I really don't know how developers think this is acceptable in 2019. Luckily, we do see fewer games with these sorts of problems these days, but this one is just very, very bad and is truly deserving of our worst port award in 2019. In our Best Games Awards, we have an award for the best technical achievement of the year, so it's only fair that we hand out an award for the opposite thing, the biggest technical blunder. This one goes to Destiny 2 and its RD Rand bug. So let's explain this one. When AMD's Ryzen 3000 CPUs first hit the market, like with a lot of CPU releases, there were a few minor issues, but mostly they worked fine, especially for gaming, where we often saw substantial performance increases over previous AMD CPUs. But there was one game that didn't work, one game that was fully broken at launch on AMD's new 3rd gen processors, and that game is Destiny 2. Destiny 2 refused to run on 3rd gen Ryzen due to a hardware bug with the RD-RAND instruction, a command that for some bizarre reason Destiny 2 decided to use but no other game does. RD-RAND is a random number generator instruction, but is known these days to be quite slow compared to other more modern commands, hence why it seems most games don't bother with it. Anyway, RD-RAND was bugged on AMD's 3rd gen Ryzen, so for several weeks, gamers who bought new Ryzen 3000 CPUs couldn't play Destiny 2 at all. Naturally, Bungie decided to blame AMD, saying gamers should just wait for a BIOS update if they want to play, rather than issuing a patch to remove their usage of RD-RAND. AMD did eventually issue the required BIOS update, but of course it's a BIOS update, it's not as easy to implement as a game update, and now, well, yeah, there is no issue at this point. Now it's hard to say who is to blame here, whether that's Destiny 2 for its usage of RD-RAND, and there are debates as to whether the game correctly uses this instruction or not, or whether it's on AMD for screwing up this instruction in the first place. Seems both are at fault, and given this was the only game that suffered as a result of this bug, I think it's a worthy winner of this year's biggest technical blunder. And now we get to the final category for our 2019 Game Awards, the biggest disappointment. Once again, we've got a variety of great nominations for this category, many of which are covered through some of our other game awards like Worst Launch and Worst Port. Ghost Recon Breakpoint got plenty of nominations here for its lackluster everything, as did Borderlands 3 for its poor launch state and optimization. Both, I think, are very fair inclusions in this category. I did have one other dishonorable mention here, and that is Wolfenstein Youngblood for failing to integrate ray tracing despite promising that RTX would be one of its features. The game was released way back in July, and we did get ray traced gameplay footage around that time, but as of late December, there is still no update available that introduces RTX functionality. This is pretty poor form and mirrors what we saw with Shadow of the Tomb Raider, which took a good 6 months to receive any ray tracing. At this point, the game is basically irrelevant. Most people that wanted to play it already have, and I don't think many people return to replay the game once ray tracing was integrated. This sort of feature really needs to be available on launch day, like we saw from Metro Exodus, Control and Modern Warfare, so still not having it in Wolfenstein Youngblood today is a big disappointment. But the overall winner of the biggest disappointment category has to be Red Dead Redemption 2. Yep, we have Red Dead winning 2 out of our 5 worst categories and has been nominated for I think one other as well, which I think is really well deserved given how technically incompetent this game launch was. This was an overwhelming nomination from our Patreon members as well, who felt let down by how this game launched and ran. There are plenty of reasons why I'm more than happy to award Red Dead as the most disappointing PC release of 2019, many of which we've covered when talking about its optimization and launch, which are both poor. But the biggest for me is simply how long PC gamers have had to wait for Red Dead 2 on PC. When the game first launched on consoles in late 2018, every PC gamer knew this game was coming at some point, we just didn't know when. Given its critical acclaim, Red Dead was one of the most anticipated PC titles of the year and certainly one of the biggest launches. Rockstar Games had a full year to get this PC launch right, perhaps even more if the developers were working on the PC version while the console version was in development. But even if we say that Rockstar only had a year to launch this game on PC, to deliver what they delivered is nothing short of a disgrace. An entire year to release a game that was broken, buggy, and ran like crap. crap. There is no competition. This is the most disappointing PC game of 2019, and one that let down fans and paying customers all over the globe. The lesson here for companies is that if you're gonna make PC gamers wait a year for your game, you better bloody nail the release and not release a broken game. Seems they were too busy guzzling money from GTA Online and spending too much time on the terrible Rockstar launcher to bother actually making the game run properly. Not good enough. You deserve the most disappointing PC game award of 2019. That's it for this one. Hopefully next year there aren't as many candidates for our Worst Games Awards and we don't have to even make this video, but somehow I doubt it. There's always one studio or a couple of studios that seem to miss the memo with PC releases and release stuff that just doesn't run well, is poorly optimized, or looks bad, or fails some of those port issues like we saw with Sekiro. I really hope it's not some of the major launches that we see like Cyberpunk. If that manages to get nominated in one of these categories, I'll be pretty disappointed, but yeah, hopefully we manage to avoid that. It's coming to the end of the year, so subscribe for all of our content coming in 2020. Like the video if you enjoyed it. You can debate what you think was the worst PC game of the year in the comments below. Don't forget to consider supporting us on Patreon if you want to do that, or check out our merch store. Links to both of those in the description below, and I'll catch you in the next one.